In this lecture, I'm going to talk about fruits. And by fruits, I mean not just the kind that you might find at a grocery store like you see in this scene here, but what we mean by fruits botanically. So first thing I'm going to do is define fruits and talk about some simple fruits, be they fleshy or dry, or be they aggregate or accessory fruits or multiple fruits. So I'm going to go through and define for you each of these different types of fruits. So a fruit, in the very generic botanical sense, is a vessel for containing the seeds of a plant. And most of the time, the fruit develops from the ovary wall. In the majority of cases, and the most ancestral of cases, you have one flower that makes up the fruit, and the fruit is made up only of the ovary wall. But we will see some cases where you have many flowers that are contributing to produce a single fruit. We call those multiple fruits. Aggregate fruits result when you have many pistils in one flower that aren't fused together. The carpels aren't fused, but still you end up with a fruit made up of these many unfused parts. And I'll show you an example of that a little bit. An accessory fruit is a fruit that is made from organs of the flower other than the ovary wall. And I'll show you some examples of that as well. The main purpose of a fruit is to disperse the seeds. It's not to feed the dispersal agent. That's just a benefit that the dispersal agent receives if it eats the fruit. And fruits aren't just the fleshy and sweet things that you find at the supermarket, but they can also be dry and use other methods besides being eaten to achieve that primary goal, which is dispersal of the seeds. So a seed is found at the center of a fruit, or many seeds may be found at the center of a fruit, and that ovary wall is called the pericarp as it develops into the fruit, and it is comprised of three layers. The outer layer, called the exocarp, a middle layer, called the mesocarp, and an inner layer, called the endocarp. And as you can see in this illustration here, the seed is at the very middle of all that, where that embryonic plant with its seed coat and its endosperm are located. So simple fruits, as you can see here, are just the pericarp of a single flower, and they may be fleshy or they may be dry. So let's give you some examples. A berry is a type of a fruit where all or most of the pericarp is fleshy, and a tomato, botanically speaking, is actually a berry. And I know most people think of tomatoes as being fruits, and they say knowledge is knowing that a tomato is fruit, and wisdom is not putting a tomato in a fruit salad. So one step further to say that tomatoes are actually berries in the botanical sense, because that pericarp is predominantly fleshy, and it's mostly the mesocarp that we are interested in eating. Other berries include things like blueberries, as you can see in this botanic illustration. Ground cherries like tomatillos, or trillium is a wildflower, and in this painted trillium, their fruits are also berries. And what makes them berries? It's that fleshy mesocarp that surrounds the seeds. A pepo, some people say pepo, is a special type of berry that is found in members of the Cucurbitaceae, which is the squash family or the melon family. Watermelons, cucumbers, squashes, pumpkins, those are all pepos, and they're characterized by having the exocarp being a thick rind, which is different and distinct from the mesocarp. And the cucumber is an example of a pepo. You can see here's a cucumber flower on the left, which develops into the cucumber that you might put in your salad on the right. Another special type of berry is the Hesperidium. And a Hesperidium is a berry that has, rather than a thick and hard rind, it has a leathery, oily rind. So the exocarp has oil glands, and the oil is not like the oil that you might find in, say, olive oil or flaxseed oil or canola oil or any of those. It's an aromatic oil, which gives the Hesperidia their distinctive flavors. So Hesperidia include things like you can see here, lemons, and you probably off the top of your head imagine what other Hesperidia are like, because they're all in the same family, the citrus family. So that includes things like oranges, tangerines, satsumas, grapefruits, limes, kumquats. All of these are Hesperidia found in that citrus family. So a lemon with the flower and the fruit shown here is an example of a Hesperidium. Moving on past our berries and our special kinds of berries, we've got a drupe. A drupe has a stony endocarp, or a pit. And that endocarp is not part of the seed. That's the real key difference here, is that the outside of the pit, like you might find in a peach as pictured here, is actually part of the ovary wall. And if you split that open, you will find that seed inside. So the mesocarp is fleshy, the endocarp is stony, and the exocarp is like a skin. So peaches, plums, nectarines are certainly all drupes, but you might be surprised to find what else is a drupe. Olives are drupes. When you get the pit out of an olive, the seed is actually inside of that, so it is also a drupe. Cherries are also stone fruit. They are also drupes. So the pit of a cherry has a seed inside of that, so that stony endocarp makes your cherry also a drupe. And blackberries and raspberries are a type of drupe as well, but they're actually aggregates of druplets. So within a single flower, as you can see in the illustration here on the left, you've got several unfused pistils that when they form the fruit, the receptacle enlarges, and each of those pistils will get fleshy, and there's going to be a little tiny pit, and inside of that pit is going to be the seed. So that is what we mean by an aggregate of druplets. We'll come back to this at the end too, to talk about aggregate fruit. Another type of fleshy fruit that you may encounter is the pome. And apples and pears are our representative pomes. In the case of a pome, it is actually an accessory fruit, because the thing that we typically eat isn't the ovary wall. We usually stop eating an apple when we get to the ovary wall. What we're actually eating is the enlarged hypanthium. The hypanthium is actually the receptacle that surrounds the ovary wall. And let me show you the next picture here. You can see here's an apple flower that's been illustrated. And that receptacle is what actually swells up and engulfs the ovary. And when you're eating an apple, you get to that swollen or that papery bit on the inside. That's actually the ovary wall. And usually when people get to that, they'll stop eating. And then inside of that are the seeds. So these types of fruits are called pome fruits. And again, that includes things like apples and pears. So those are our fleshy fruits, and now we're moving into our dry fruits. And the first set of dry fruits I want to talk about are the dry dehiscent fruits. Dehiscent means that these are fruits that split open, and they split open along a seam that's present, and that seam is called a suture. And we classify our dry dehiscent fruits based on the number of sutures that they have. So a follicle, as was illustrated in the last slide, has just one suture. A legume is one type of dry dehiscent fruit that has two sutures, as you can see in that peanut in the upper left. And a capsule is a dry dehiscent fruit that has multiple sutures. And that is an okra pod that you see once it's fully matured. It dries out, it splits open, and releases the seeds. But most people eat okra before it gets to be fully mature, in the sense of it's ready to let the seeds go. So sweet gum here on the left and southern magnolia on the right are actually aggregates of follicles. So they open along one suture, but there's several pistils that are not fused together that form the fruit. So we call that an aggregate or a collection of follicles. So those unfused pistils dehisce along one suture. Legumes include things like members of the pea family. That includes peanuts, all the different types of beans and peas. Garden peas are found in a pea pod, as are things like kidney beans and pinto beans and black beans and white beans, garbanzo beans. They all grow inside a pod. So when you eat a pea or a kidney bean, what you're actually eating are the seeds of the plant and not the fruits. When you're eating green beans, you're actually eating the entire fruit. But we eat green beans, like with okra, before they're fully mature. If you let green beans grow to maturity, they get woody and they dry out, and they're not very good to eat. So those dry dehiscent fruits that open along two sutures are legumes. Capsules are dry dehiscent fruits that open along more than two sutures. So it might be three, like you see in the meadow violet in the upper left, or it could be more than three. It could be 5, 10, who knows, sutures that open up to release the seeds. So those were all dry fruits that have sutures or planes that open by design. Indehiscent fruits are fruits that are dry, but they do not open along a designed suture. And we've got 4 types of dry indehiscent fruits. Achenes, like a sunflower seed, is a really great example of an achene. Samaras, or some people say samaras, that are winged fruit. Nuts, true botanic nuts, which, like berries, are a little bit different from what you're accustomed to thinking of as nuts. And then grains, or caryopses, which are the fruits of the grass family. So samaras, or samaras, are dry indehiscent fruits that have a wing, and they have those wings because they're adapted for anemochory. You may recall from previous video that anemochory is fruit dispersal by wind. So often these dry indehiscent fruits, like many dry indehiscent fruits, don't have any coloration or pigmentation because, again, the wind is not really concerned with your physical appearance so much as how well you catch the breeze. So the most familiar samaras, to me at least, are maple samaras that have the 2 wings. It's 2 fruits that are fused together, one on each side of the axis of the flower. Ashes and elms have a single wing. And then there's a picture there in the lower right of a combretum, which is a genus of shrubs that grows in Africa. And you can see their samaras, and they have 3 wings. So you're not limited in the number of wings, but they all kind of have the same function by analogy, which is anemochory, or wind dispersal of the fruits and seeds. Achenes are a dry, one-seeded indehiscent fruit And the thing that identifies a fruit as being a achene is that the seed is only attached to the ovary wall at a single point. So imagine, if you will, a sunflower seed uh, or a sunflower fruit. The seed is actually the kernel. It's inside what you normally get when you buy a package of sunflower seeds. If you crack them open with your teeth, you're cracking open the kernel. You're releasing the kernel, the seed, from the fruit. And that pointy bit on the kernel is where it was attached to the mother sporophyte. So those are achenes, and dandelions, as it turns out, also have achenes, those beaked achenes. That's the umbrella with the capillary bristles that have dandelions have adapted for anemocori, dispersal by wind. But there are a lot of other dry indehiscent achenes out there. Botanically speaking, a nut is a dry indehiscent fruit that's typically one-seeded, but the pericarp completely surrounds the seed. So acorns, as it turns out, are nuts. Beech trees produce nuts, but a lot of other things that we think of as being nuts are actually not nuts. For example, peanuts are not nuts. Peanuts are legumes. And if you ever buy peanuts that haven't been shelled, you probably know this because they have those two sutures that surround the two seeds when you want to open those peanuts. Caryopses are the fruits of the grass family. So all of our grasses, including the grass in your lawn that you mow, typically we mow our lawn in order to prevent it from producing flowers and fruits. But many of our most important grains, in fact, all of our grains that we typically use, are members of the grass family, and they are the grains that we eat are caryopses. Actually, we release the seeds, and we eat the seed that's within the caryopsis. So if you eat whole grain, you might be getting some of the fruit in there as well. Mostly what you're eating, if you're eating whole grain, is the seed coat around the seed that's in there. But in order to get those grains, we have to release them from the caryopses. Okay, so accessory fruits are fruits that are comprised of tissue other than the ovary wall. And we often mention strawberries at this point, even though strawberries are, as I said at the beginning, brought to you by the letter A, meaning that they are accessory fruits, but they're also aggregate fruits, and they're also achenes. So going from left to right here, you can see different developmental stages of a wild strawberry. On the left, you've got the flower, which has 5 petals, indicating that it's a dicot. It's got about 10 stamens, and then you've got a whole bunch of unfused pistils in there. And it's kind of hard to see in the second picture there, as it's starting to develop past the point where it's been pollinated to develop into a fruit. But in that third picture, that whitish picture, you can see all of those pistils with the stigmas still on them. Now those are the different ovaries that have the seeds inside of them. And so when the strawberry is fully developed, all of those red and yellowish, greenish things on the outside, those are actually the fruits. And they are achenes, and they have seeds inside of them. So what is it that you're eating that's the red sweet part? That's actually the receptacle that is underneath all of that in the flower on the left that swells up, gets full of sugar and full of pigments that attract the dispersal agents to come along and eat it and excrete the seeds somewhere else through endozoochory. So here's another picture showing that strawberries are an accessory fruit with an aggregate of achenes. So you've got many unfused pistils, which is what makes it an aggregate. The red part again, is the receptacle and not the ovary wall, so that's what makes it an accessory fruit, and the actual fruits are those one-seeded achenes. And if you ever, next time you get a strawberry from the supermarket or wherever you get your strawberries, um, you can peel back that hull, which is the calyx, and you'll see, you might find the remains of petals under there, but you'll certainly see the remains of the stamens under there, and hopefully you'll understand that how the anatomy of the strawberry functions. One more time, you can see the sepals, the hull, you can see the stamens under there, and you can see the receptacle that is swollen and sweet and juicy. And you can even still see on those achenes that they still retain the style and the stigma through which they were pollinated. Pomes, again, are also accessory fruits because the part that we are eating, which is part of that dispersal unit, which is the fruit, is the receptacle. And yes, it's true that apples and pears and strawberries and blackberries and raspberries are all in the same family. They're all in the rose family. And as I mentioned before, blackberries and raspberries are aggregate fruit because you have multiple unfused pistils that are contributing to the fruit that is produced. All right, the last type of fruits that I want to tell you about today are the multiple fruits. In multiple fruits, you've got numerous flowers. So remember, a flower, botanically speaking, is a discrete unit of those 4 whorls or however many whorls, if it's an imperfect or incomplete flower. But the pistils that have either have both andrecium and gynoecium, or just one or the other. They may have sepals or petals, but that's what defines an individual flower. And in the case of the black mulberry, it's a little bit different from a strawberry or a raspberry, even though they look similar, because the thing that makes up the fruit is actually the product of several flowers. Not unfused pistils within a single flower, but several flowers all together that make up the fruit. Pineapples are also a very familiar example of a multiple fruit. So here's a pineapple inflorescence. So as a pineapple is growing, you can see that what we've got here are multiple corollas, multiple calyxes that are each producing their own flower. And then when it goes to maturity, what you have is a pineapple. So each of those facets of the pineapple was, when it was in flower, an individual flower. So all of those flowers are kind of working together to form one great big fruit, or infructescence, that is what we eat. Other examples of multiple fruits include things like figs that are something that you might find and like to eat. Partridge berry is actually a multiple fruit that we have growing around here in the southeast, which has a bright red berry. Partridge berry grows in the understory. Frequently you find it on the forest floor as like a trailing vine. And you might find the red berries that are the fruits of the partridge berry. And you find that they kind of look sort of like a red blueberry, but you'll notice something very odd about them, which is they have 2 of those little sets of lips on them that you might find on a blueberry. And those lips are actually the scars from where the petals, or the corolla, abscised from the ovary, or dropped off of the ovary. So a partridge berry is actually made up of 2 flowers. So in a sense, it is the simplest multiple fruit you could have because it has just 2 flowers that contribute to making the one fruit, but it's still considered a multiple fruit. So I think that's my last slide, so I will end it there.